In December 1938, in the darkening shadow of Nazi Germany, a 60-year-old Jewish woman who had fled persecution sought refuge in Sweden. Despite losing her laboratory, home, and country, her scientific mind remained as sharp as ever. During a Christmas walk with her nephew through the snowy Swedish countryside, she scribbled calculations on scraps of paper that would change our understanding of physics forever. She had just solved the puzzle of nuclear fission, comprehending how the uranium atom could be split, releasing enormous energy. This breakthrough would transform the world, leading directly to both nuclear power and the atomic bomb. Her name was Lise Meitner, and despite her monumental contribution, history nearly forgot her. While her male colleague Otto Hahn received the 1944 Nobel Prize for their joint work, Meitner was excluded from the honor. She became yet another brilliant woman scientist whose name faded into obscurity while men claimed credit for her discoveries. Today, we're exploring the remarkable life of Lise Meitner, a pioneering physicist who broke barriers, made groundbreaking discoveries, and persevered through extraordinary adversity. This is the story of a woman who split the atom but was denied her rightful place in history. Lise Meitner was born on November 7, 1878, in Vienna, Austria, the third of 8 children in a Jewish family. Her father, Philip Meitner, was one of the first Jewish lawyers in Austria, and her mother, Hedwig, was a talented pianist. The Meitner household valued education highly, and all the children were encouraged to pursue intellectual interests. From an early age, Lise displayed remarkable intelligence and curiosity about how the world worked. She kept a notebook under her pillow where she would write down questions about mathematics and science. At age 8, she began calculating how many seconds a person lives, recording her findings meticulously in small notebooks. But being born female in the late 19th century meant facing significant barriers to formal education. In Austria at that time, girls weren't allowed to attend the academic secondary schools that prepared students for university. This meant Lise's formal education would end at age 14, a devastating blow for a girl with such intellectual promise. However, her parents recognized her exceptional abilities and arranged for private tutoring. Through sheer determination and with her family's support, Lise prepared for the university entrance examination. In 1901, at the age of 22, she passed with flying colors and became only the second woman ever admitted to the University of Vienna's physics program. At university, Lise thrived under the mentorship of renowned physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, one of the few professors who welcomed female students. Boltzmann's enthusiasm for atomic theory ignited Meitner's lifelong fascination with the subject. His approach to physics, combining rigorous mathematical analysis with profound philosophical insights, deeply influenced her scientific thinking. In 1905, Meitner became the second woman to earn a doctorate in physics from the University of Vienna. Her dissertation on heat conduction demonstrated her exceptional mathematical ability and experimental skill. But despite her impressive credentials, Austria offered few research opportunities for women scientists. Lise knew that to pursue serious scientific work, she needed to leave Vienna. Her sights turned to Berlin, home to some of the world's leading physicists. In 1907, Meitner arrived in Berlin with high hopes, but immediately faced disappointment. Max Planck, the famous theoretical physicist whose lectures she hoped to attend, maintained that women belong in the kitchen, not the laboratory. Despite his personal beliefs, Planck recognized Meitner's exceptional talent and allowed her to attend his lectures, though she remained the only woman in a sea of male students. Finding laboratory space proved even more challenging. The prestigious Berlin institutions barred women from their research facilities. Eventually, Meitner met a young chemist named Otto Hahn, who needed a physicist to collaborate with on his radioactivity research. Their partnership would last 30 years and produce groundbreaking discoveries. Initially, Meitner's situation was humiliating. She worked in a converted carpenter's workshop in the basement of the Chemistry Institute, forbidden from entering the main laboratories or even using the front entrance of the building. When nature called, she had to use a restaurant across the street because the institute had no women's restrooms. Despite these indignities, Meitner was determined to prove herself. She and Hahn established a productive scientific partnership, combining her expertise in physics with his chemistry background. Together, they discovered several new isotopes and made important contributions to the emerging field of nuclear physics. World War I temporarily interrupted their research. Meitner trained as an X-ray nurse and served on the Austrian front, witnessing the horrors of war firsthand. She returned to Berlin in 1917, more determined than ever to advance scientific knowledge. In 1918, Meitner and Hahn announced the discovery of protactinium, a new radioactive element. This significant finding enhanced both their reputations in the scientific community. Following this success, Meitner was finally given her own physics section at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Chemistry, becoming the first female department head at a German research institution. The 1920s brought better times. After Germany became a republic, women gained more rights and opportunities. Meitner was appointed a professor at the University of Berlin in 1926, the first woman to hold such a position in Germany. Her laboratory became a hub for nuclear research, attracting talented scientists from around the world. During this period, Meitner made crucial contributions to understanding beta radiation, the electron emission from radioactive decay. She discovered that electrons emitted during radioactive decay had a continuous energy spectrum rather than discrete energy levels as expected. This puzzling beta decay problem later led to Wolfgang Pauli's proposal of the neutrino particle. By the early 1930s, Lise Meitner was internationally recognized as one of the world's leading nuclear physicists. She led a thriving research program, published regularly in prestigious journals, and collaborated with luminaries like Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein. Despite continuing gender discrimination, she had overcome enormous obstacles to earn respect in a male-dominated field. But as the decade progressed, dark clouds gathered over Germany. The rise of the Nazi Party would soon force Meitner to confront challenges far beyond scientific puzzles. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, Meitner initially believed her position was secure. Though Jewish by birth, she had converted to Protestantism years earlier and held Austrian citizenship. More importantly, she was an internationally respected scientist directing critical research. This sense of security proved tragically misplaced. In April 1933, the Nazi government passed the Law for the Restoration of the Professional Civil Service, which removed Jews from government positions, including university posts. While Meitner was temporarily protected by her Austrian citizenship and veteran status from World War I, she watched in horror as Jewish colleagues were dismissed, including many close friends. The once vibrant Berlin scientific community disintegrated as Jewish scientists fled Germany or lost their positions. Albert Einstein left for America, never to return. Max Born moved to England. Numerous others scattered across the globe, creating a brain drain that would permanently damage German science. Despite the increasingly hostile environment, Meitner made the difficult decision to stay. Her laboratory work was progressing rapidly, and she felt responsible for her team. Perhaps most importantly, she couldn't bear to abandon her research partnership with Otto Hahn. As she later wrote, "The problems we were working on were so interesting that I could not leave." For 5 years, Meitner continued her work amid growing isolation and anxiety. Her situation worsened in March 1938 when Nazi Germany annexed Austria, instantly transforming Meitner from an Austrian foreigner to a German Jew without protection. Friends urged her to leave immediately, but she hesitated, unwilling to believe the danger was imminent. By summer 1938, it became clear that Meitner's life was at risk. With her passport confiscated and borders closely monitored, escape seemed impossible. In a dramatic sequence worthy of a spy novel, Dutch colleagues arranged a secret escape plan. The Dutch physicist Dirk Koster traveled to Berlin and accompanied Meitner to the Dutch border. With only 2 small suitcases containing personal belongings and 10 marks in her purse, all she was legally allowed to take, 59-year-old Meitner fled the country she had called home for 3 decades. At the German-Dutch border, she endured terrifying moments as Nazi officials examined her documents. A train strike had drawn extra security personnel to the border crossing, and discovery would have meant imprisonment or worse. Fortunately, the officials allowed her to pass. Once safely in the Netherlands, Meitner later recalled feeling like a newborn baby, without any connection to the world around me. From the Netherlands, Meitner traveled to Sweden, where former student Mona Siegbahn had arranged a position for her at the Nobel Institute. But instead of finding a welcoming scientific home, she faced new disappointments. Siegbahn provided no laboratory equipment, no assistance, and not even a proper desk. Isolated, without resources, and separated from her lifelong work, Meitner wrote to a friend, "I am learning Swedish and searching for a way back to physics." Despite the trauma of exile and the loss of her laboratory, Meitner's scientific story was far from over. In fact, her greatest discovery lay just ahead. While Meitner struggled to establish herself in Sweden, her longtime collaborator Otto Hahn continued their research in Berlin. Through letters, they maintained their scientific partnership, with Hahn performing the chemical experiments and Meitner providing theoretical guidance from exile. In late 1938, Hahn and his assistant Fritz Strassmann conducted experiments bombarding uranium with neutrons. Their chemical analysis yielded puzzling results. The uranium appeared to break down into barium, a much lighter element. This defied the accepted understanding of nuclear reactions, where elements typically changed by only small increments in atomic weight. Confused by his findings, Hahn wrote to Meitner on December 19th, describing the results and asking for her interpretation. He concluded his letter with, "Perhaps you can suggest some fantastic explanation. We know ourselves that it can't actually burst apart into barium." During Christmas 1938, Meitner was visited by her nephew Otto Robert Frisch, also a physicist. During a now famous walk through the snowy Swedish countryside, aunt and nephew discussed Hahn's puzzling results. Sitting on a fallen log, Meitner began calculating on scraps of paper. Drawing on Einstein's equation E = mc2, Meitner realized that the uranium nucleus might indeed be splitting, with a small amount of mass converting to enormous energy. She and Frisch estimated the energy released would be about 200 million electron volts per atom, an astounding amount from a single nucleus. Meitner and Frisch named this process nuclear fission, borrowing the term from biology, where it describes cell division. On January 6, 1939, Hahn and Strassmann published their chemical findings in the German journal Naturwissenschaften, with no mention of Meitner due to the political danger associated with acknowledging a Jewish scientist. Shortly afterward, Meitner and Frisch published their theoretical explanation in the British journal Nature. Their paper provided the physical interpretation that made sense of Hahn's chemical results and explained the enormous energy release. News of nuclear fission spread rapidly through the scientific community. Its implications were immediately obvious. If the energy of a single splitting atom was enormous, the potential energy from a chain reaction of many atoms would be virtually unlimited. Such power could revolutionize energy production or create weapons of unprecedented destructiveness. The discovery came at a moment of mounting global tension. World War II began later that year, and scientists in multiple countries raced to develop nuclear technology. In August 1939, Albert Einstein signed a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt warning that Germany might develop atomic bombs. This letter helped launch the Manhattan Project, the American effort that would produce the first nuclear weapons. Ironically, Meitner refused multiple invitations to join the Manhattan Project, saying she would have nothing to do with a bomb. Although she had provided the theoretical breakthrough that made nuclear weapons possible, she was deeply troubled by this application of her work. Meanwhile, in Stockholm, Meitner continued her research under difficult circumstances. She published important papers on nuclear reactions and gradually built a modest laboratory at the Nobel Institute. But Sweden never felt like home, and she struggled with feelings of isolation and displacement. When World War II ended in 1945, the true horror of the Nazi regime became clear. Meitner learned that many family members and friends had perished in the Holocaust. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki also weighed heavily on her conscience, despite her refusal to work on weapons development. As the scientific community began distributing accolades for wartime achievements, Meitner hoped for recognition of her pivotal contribution to nuclear fission. Instead, she would face her most painful professional disappointment. In November 1945, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announced that Otto Hahn, and only Hahn, would receive the 1944 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his discovery of the fission of heavy nuclei. There was no mention of Lise Meitner. The news devastated Meitner. While she never publicly criticized the decision, her private letters reveal her deep hurt. To a friend she wrote, "Surely Hahn fully deserved the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. There is really no doubt about it. But I believe that Otto Robert Frisch and I contributed something not insignificant to the clarification of the process of uranium fission." This understated response masked a profound injustice. The Nobel Committee had not simply overlooked Meitner, they had deliberately excluded her despite nominations from multiple scientists, including previous Nobel laureates. Recently opened Nobel archives reveal the extent of this injustice. Meitner had been nominated for the Nobel Prize 48 times between 1924 and 1965, yet never received it. For the fission work specifically, the committee consulted Mana Siegbahn, the same physicist who had marginalized Meitner at the Stockholm Institute, who dismissed her contributions. The circumstances that led to this exclusion were complex. Wartime isolation had limited communication between scientists, allowing Hahn to emphasize his experimental work while downplaying Meitner's theoretical contributions. Gender bias certainly played a role, as did lingering anti-Semitism and Swedish politics. The chemistry committee also lacked the physics expertise to fully appreciate Meitner's crucial theoretical interpretation. Whatever the reasons, the result was clear. One of the most important female scientists of the 20th century was denied recognition for her greatest discovery. Hahn himself did little to correct the record, speaking vaguely about our research while accepting full credit for the discovery. The Nobel slight was not the only recognition denied to Meitner. In post-war Germany, Hahn became celebrated as the father of nuclear fission and was elected president of the Max Planck Society, formerly the Kaiser Wilhelm Society. Streets, institutes, and medals were named after him, while Meitner remained largely forgotten. This pattern of overlooking women's contributions in science was depressingly common. Throughout history, female scientists like Rosalind Franklin, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, and Chien-Shiung Wu made crucial discoveries only to see male colleagues receive the accolades. Meitner's case stands out for its significance. Few scientific discoveries have had greater impact than nuclear fission, and for the clear documentation of her role. Despite the Nobel oversight, Meitner did receive some recognition later in life. She was awarded the Max Planck Medal, the Otto Hahn Prize, ironically named after her colleague, and several honorary doctorates. Element 109 on the periodic table was named Meitnerium in her honor. Time magazine featured her on a 1946 cover, calling her the mother of the atomic bomb, a label she despised, given her opposition to nuclear weapons. But none of these honors matched the prestige of the Nobel Prize, and they came too late to alter the course of her career. By the time significant recognition arrived, Meitner was elderly, and her most productive scientific years were behind her. After the war, Meitner continued her research in Stockholm, focusing on nuclear reactions and applications of radioactive isotopes. Though she never again achieved a breakthrough comparable to nuclear fission, she remained an active scientist well into her 70s. In 1947, at age 68, she finally received a proper appointment as a professor at the University College of Stockholm and established a small laboratory. She traveled widely, giving lectures about nuclear physics and occasionally speaking about her experiences as a woman in science. Meitner maintained a complicated relationship with Germany and Austria. She initially refused invitations to return, unable to forgive the nations that had persecuted Jews and caused such destruction. Eventually, she made brief visits to Germany, but declined permanent positions or honors that might suggest reconciliation. Her relationship with Otto Hahn also remained complex. They reunited occasionally after the war, maintaining a polite but strained friendship. While Hahn enjoyed fame and prestige as a Nobel laureate, Meitner lived modestly in Stockholm, still processing the trauma of exile and the loss of recognition for her work. In 1960, at age 81, Meitner moved to Cambridge, England, to be near her nephew, Otto Frisch. She spent her final years in quiet retirement, occasionally corresponding with scientists and historians interested in her work. Despite the injustices she had experienced, she maintained her lifelong passion for physics and her dedication to scientific truth. Lise Meitner died on October 27, 1968, just short of her 90th birthday. Otto Hahn chose not to attend her funeral. Her gravestone bears the epitaph she requested: Lise Meitner, a physicist who never lost her humanity. In the decades following her death, historians of science began reassessing Meitner's contributions. Modern accounts of nuclear fission now typically credit the discovery to the team of Meitner, Hahn, Strassmann, and Frisch, acknowledging both the experimental and theoretical components of the breakthrough. Yet public recognition has lagged behind scholarly reassessment. While Hahn remains widely known, Meitner's name continues to be omitted from many textbooks and popular accounts of scientific history. When the U.S. Department of Energy named its national laboratories, it honored male scientists like Ernest Lawrence, Enrico Fermi, and Argonne, but not Meitner. This pattern reflects a broader historical tendency to forget women's contributions to science. Barriers to education and professional advancement prevented many women from pursuing scientific careers at all. Those who managed to overcome these obstacles often worked as invisible assistants to male colleagues or found their achievements attributed to men. For those like Meitner who did receive some recognition during their lifetimes, historical memory has proved fleeting. Without the anchor of prestigious awards like the Nobel Prize or institutional positions of power, their legacies have faded while their male contemporaries are remembered as pioneers. The injustice of Meitner's exclusion from the Nobel Prize stands as one of the most significant oversights in the award's history. Had she received this recognition, generations of physics students would have learned her name alongside those of Einstein, Bohr, and other giants of 20th century science. Instead, Meitner joined the long list of forgotten women who changed history. Brilliant minds whose contributions shaped our world, but whose names remain unfamiliar to most people. Her story reminds us that scientific progress has never been a meritocracy, but rather a human endeavor shaped by the same prejudices and power dynamics that affect all aspects of society. Lise Meitner's story is exceptional, but not unique. Throughout history, countless women have made significant contributions to science only to be overlooked, forgotten, or deliberately erased from the narrative. Consider Rosalind Franklin, whose X-ray crystallography work was crucial to discovering DNA's structure. While James Watson and Francis Crick received the Nobel Prize, Franklin's contribution was acknowledged only after her death. Or Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who discovered pulsars as a graduate student, only to see her supervisor receive the Nobel Prize for the discovery. When asked about this injustice years later, Bell Burnell replied with resignation, "That's how science was in those days." Chien-Shiung Wu performed the critical experiment that disproved the law of conservation of parity in weak interactions. Her male colleagues who had merely proposed the theory, not tested it, received the Nobel Prize, while Wu was excluded. Going further back, we find figures like Émilie du Châtelet, who translated and expanded Newton's Principia Mathematica, adding original concepts that anticipated the conservation of energy. Her work laid foundations for modern physics, yet she remains largely unknown outside academic circles. In the early 20th century, women like Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin discovered the composition of stars, and Henrietta Swan Leavitt developed methods to measure cosmic distances, both fundamental advances that enabled modern astronomy. Yet their names rarely appear in general histories of science. Even Marie Curie, perhaps the most famous female scientist, faced extraordinary barriers and prejudice. Despite winning 2 Nobel Prizes, she was denied membership in the French Academy of Sciences because of her gender and was subjected to scandalous press coverage about her personal life that no male scientist would have endured. What these women share with Meitner is not just scientific brilliance, but remarkable persistence in the face of systematic exclusion. They pursued knowledge despite being denied education, laboratory resources, academic positions, and recognition. Many worked without pay, funding their research from personal savings or family support. Their stories reveal a troubling pattern in how scientific credit is assigned and how historical memory operates. Contributions by women are often attributed to male colleagues, supervisors, or collaborators. When women's work is acknowledged, it's frequently minimized as technical assistance rather than intellectual leadership. The consequences of this erasure extend beyond historical injustice. When we lose women's stories from our scientific heritage, we also lose role models who might inspire future generations. Young women interested in science have fewer historical figures who look like them to admire and emulate. More subtly, forgetting these women reinforces the false notion that scientific genius is predominantly a male attribute. It perpetuates the myth that women's historical absence from science resulted from lack of ability or interest rather than systematic exclusion and unequal opportunity. Meitner herself recognized this problem. Later in life, she often spoke to women's groups about careers in science, encouraging young women to pursue their interests despite the obstacles. She wrote, "Science makes people reach selflessly for truth and objectivity. It teaches people to accept reality with wonder and admiration, not to mention the deep joy and awe that the natural order of things brings to the true scientist." Today, more than 50 years after her death, Lise Meitner's story remains profoundly relevant. While formal barriers to women in science have largely fallen, subtle biases and structural inequalities persist. Studies consistently show that women scientists receive less funding, fewer citations, and fewer prestigious awards than equally qualified male colleagues. Female scientists are more likely to have their expertise questioned, their achievements attributed to male collaborators, and their work scrutinized more harshly during peer review. The phenomenon known as the Matilda effect, named after 19th century suffragist Matilda Joslyn Gage, describes the systematic under-recognition of women's contributions to science. Meitner's Nobel snub represents perhaps the most consequential example of this effect in scientific history. Modern efforts to address these imbalances include initiatives to highlight forgotten women in science. Projects like Women You Should Know and Massive Science's Women of Science aim to recover and celebrate contributions that traditional histories have overlooked. educational curricula are slowly changing to include more diverse scientific heroes. Museums and exhibitions increasingly feature women scientists, allowing visitors to see that science has never been an exclusively male endeavor. Digital media has accelerated this reassessment. Online platforms allow for sharing stories of overlooked scientists, creating visibility that was impossible in previous generations. Social media campaigns like #WomenInSTEM help raise awareness of both historical figures and contemporary challenges. Yet significant gaps remain. A 2016 study found that science textbooks mention male scientists nearly 3 times as often as female scientists. Popular accounts of scientific history still disproportionately feature male protagonists, reinforcing the impression that women's contributions were peripheral. This imbalance affects how young people envision scientific careers. Research shows that when children are asked to draw a scientist, the majority, including girls, draw men in lab coats. These unconscious associations create psychological barriers that can discourage girls from pursuing scientific interests. Meitner's story provides a powerful counter-narrative. Her life demonstrates that scientific brilliance is not gendered and that persistence can overcome tremendous obstacles. Her ethical stance against weapons development reminds us that scientific progress must be guided by humanistic values. Perhaps most importantly, Meitner's experience shows how recognition shapes legacy. Despite her monumental contribution to nuclear physics, she remains less well known than many male scientists whose discoveries had far less impact on the world. By recovering and sharing stories like Meitner's, we create a more accurate understanding of scientific progress as a collaborative human endeavor. We honor forgotten pioneers while inspiring new generations to pursue knowledge regardless of gender or background. As Meitner herself said, "Science makes people reach selflessly for truth and objectivity." In reclaiming her legacy, we reach for a deeper truth about who contributes to human knowledge and whose contributions we choose to remember. As our exploration of Lise Meitner's remarkable life comes to a close, we're left with both inspiration and discomfort. Inspiration from her extraordinary achievements and discomfort from the injustice of her historical treatment. Born in an era when women were barred from higher education, Meitner broke through barrier after barrier through sheer intellectual force. She became one of the world's leading nuclear physicists at a time when most scientific institutions wouldn't even allow women through their doors. When forced to flee Nazi Germany at age 59, leaving behind her laboratory, possessions, and life's work, she didn't surrender to despair. Instead, she made her greatest discovery: the theoretical explanation of nuclear fission that would transform our understanding of matter and energy. And when the Nobel Committee overlooked her contribution, awarding sole credit to her male colleague, she responded not with bitterness, but by continuing her scientific work with dignity and determination. Yet for all her resilience and achievement, Meitner has not received the historical recognition she deserves. Her name doesn't appear alongside Einstein, Bohr, or Fermi in most accounts of 20th century physics. Few people outside the scientific community know of her crucial role in one of history's most consequential discoveries. This oversight reflects broader patterns in how we remember scientific achievement. When male scientists overcome obstacles to make important discoveries, we celebrate their genius and perseverance. When women do the same, their stories often fade from collective memory, their contributions minimized or forgotten entirely. Reclaiming Meitner's legacy means more than adding her name to textbooks or creating memorials. It requires us to reconsider how scientific credit is assigned and how historical memory operates. It means acknowledging the systemic barriers that have excluded diverse voices from scientific discourse throughout history. For young people considering scientific careers today, Meitner offers a powerful example of intellectual courage and ethical commitment. She pursued knowledge despite enormous obstacles. She maintained scientific rigor even when political pressures encouraged compromise. And she considered the moral implications of her discoveries, refusing to participate in weapons development despite the professional advantages it might have offered. Her story reminds us that scientific progress doesn't occur in isolation from social and political contexts. The same European society that produced brilliant theoretical physics also generated devastating world wars and genocidal persecution. Meitner navigated these contradictions with integrity, maintaining her humanitarian values alongside her scientific precision. As we face contemporary challenges that require both scientific innovation and ethical wisdom, climate change, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, Meitner's example seems especially relevant. We need scientists who pursue knowledge with her dedication while considering the broader implications of their work with her moral seriousness. Science makes people reach selflessly for truth and objectivity, Meitner once wrote. In recovering her story from historical neglect, we reach for a more complete truth about who contributes to scientific progress and whose contributions we choose to celebrate. Lise Meitner may have been denied the Nobel Prize, but her legacy transcends any single accolade. She belongs in the pantheon of scientists who fundamentally changed our understanding of the physical world, not as a footnote or an asterisk, but as a central figure whose intellectual courage and scientific insight helped unveil the secrets of the atom. Her epitaph reads simply, "A physicist who never lost her humanity." In remembering Lise Meitner, we reclaim not just an overlooked scientist, but a more humane vision of scientific progress itself, one that values diverse contributions and measures success not just by knowledge gained, but by wisdom applied. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Lise Meitner's extraordinary life. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share to help more people discover the forgotten women who changed our world. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and remember the scientists whose stories history almost forgot. This has been Lise Meitner, the mother of nuclear fission they never honored. The third video in our 10-part YouTube podcast series, Forgotten Women Who Changed History. Sources for this video include Reif, Patricia; Lise Meitner and the Dawn of the Nuclear Age, Berkhäuser, 1999; Saimi, Ruth Lewin. Lise Meitner, A Life in Physics, University of California Press, 1996. Crawford, Elizabeth, Ruth Lewin Syme, and Mark Walker. A Nobel Tale of Post-War Injustice. Physics Today, 50, No. 9, 1997, 26-32. Weisner, Emily, and Bettina Horlin. Rosalind Franklin and the Dark Lady of DNA. Notes and Records of the Royal Society, 65, No. 4, 2011. 399-403. McGrain, Sharon Birch. Nobel Prize Women in Science, Their Lives, Struggles, and Momentous Discoveries. Joseph Henry Press, 2001. Remember to check the description below for additional resources on Lise Meitner and other overlooked women in science and technology. Thank you for watching.